All right, let's get right into it. What we're talking about today, it's not just another market disruption or a blip on the radar for supply chains. No, we are looking at a huge, fundamental shift in how the entire world moves goods. This is a whole new reality, and it's being shaped by conflict, inflation, and a massive strategic realignment.
Now, you have to understand, the IMF, they don't just throw words like this around lightly. When they say the global economy is living in the shadow of war, that's a massive statement. It basically sets the stage for everything we're about to dig into. It's their way of telling all of us, hey, the old rules, they don't apply anymore. The risks are way, way higher now. This isn't just some storm we can wait out. It feels more like the climate itself has changed. And there's a word for this new climate, stagflation. And let me tell you, it's pretty much the worst of all worlds for any economy. But for anyone in the supply chain world, it is a total nightmare. Just think about it. You can't just pass on all your rising costs to your customers because they're already buying less stuff. But at the same time, you can't stop buying your own materials, and those prices just keep going up and up. It puts you in this incredibly painful strategic squeeze. So the big question is, how did we even get here? I mean, this whole crisis didn't just pop up everywhere at once. Nope. It all started with one single, incredibly critical choke point. One flashpoint that kicked off a chain reaction that's now being felt all across the globe. Okay, so here's what happened. On April 22nd, 2026, things got real. Iran's IRGC, that's the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, they went out and seized two massive container ships from MSC. And MSC, they're one of the biggest shipping lines on the planet. This all happened right in the Strait of Hormuz. Well, the U.S. Navy responded pretty quickly, intercepting an Iranian oil tanker out in the Indian Ocean. And that right there, that was the moment. This wasn't just about oil tankers anymore. The conflict had officially spilled over into everyday mainstream commercial shipping. And then, just one day later, the whole situation got dialed up to 11. This order came down from the White House. This wasn't a suggestion, it was a direct order. And it instantly moved this thing from, a commercial disruption to the very brink of a military conflict. The entire risk calculation for every single ship in that part of the world changed in an instant. The fallout from that was immediate and honestly crystal clear. The game had completely changed overnight. It wasn't just about trying to avoid sanctioned oil shipments anymore. All of a sudden, if you had a container full of, say, electronics or clothes or machine parts, and it was on a ship passing through the Gulf, that container, your container, was now a potential target in a massive geopolitical standoff. Okay, so the geopolitical stage is set, right? So what happens next? How did this hit the actual arteries of global trade, the shipping lanes? Well, the impact on the freight markets was immediate, and it was absolutely brutal. I mean, just take a look at these numbers. They're staggering. Rates from the Far East to the U.S. West Coast just exploded, up 51% since February. The East Coast wasn't much better, up 44%. Now, I know what you're thinking. You're seeing that little minus 4% for North Europe and thinking, oh, okay, maybe things are cooling off over there. But that is not the whole story, not even close. Yeah, this is what's so interesting because it really highlights a huge misunderstanding that was going on in the market at the time. The jump in Trans-Pacific rates, that's pretty easy to understand, right? Less capacity, more risk, so costs go way up. Simple. But that little dip in Europe, that's what the experts are calling a false signal. It doesn't mean the crisis is getting better. All it means is that carriers found some temporary and, frankly, inefficient ways to get around the problem for a little while. The core issue is still there, and it's actually getting worse. But look, this crisis doesn't just end at the ports, not by a long shot. That shockwave that started in one tiny little strait of water, it just kept going, washing over the entire global economy. And it started hitting things we all feel, from the price of gas to the cost of groceries. So you have to be asking, right? How does one little choke point in the Middle East end up affecting literally the entire world? It's a great question. And the answer is all about the ripple effects, the second and third order consequences. It's about all the hidden connections that tie our incredibly complex world together. This goes way beyond just the cost of shipping a box from Shanghai to LA. And a lot of it starts right here. When you disrupt oil traffic, it almost immediately means pain at the pump. And we're not just talking about a headache for your morning commute. When diesel hits $5.61 a gallon, think of that as a direct tax on every single thing that moves on a truck, which is, well, almost everything.
This is how you inject inflation directly into the veins of the domestic supply chain. But here's the real shocker. The thing nobody was really talking about at first. It turns out those same shipping routes that carry oil, they also carry essential components for fertilizer. So when the Strait of Hormuz was affected, it instantly took about 20% of the entire global supply of phosphate offline. And phosphate, that's a key ingredient for growing the food we all eat. And here's the really crucial and kinda terrifying part. There's a delay built into this. Farmers are getting hit with these insane costs right now while they're planting. But the consequences of that, smaller harvests and higher grain prices, we won't see that on our grocery store shelves for another 6 to 12 months. That means the food price inflation for the end of 2026, it's already baked in. It's coming, no matter what. Okay, let's switch gears to the tech world. You've seen the news, right? This massive multi-billion-dollar push to bring chip manufacturing back to the US. But here's the crazy part. This huge strategic investment now has a brand new, totally unexpected vulnerability. A giant chunk of the super pure helium you need to make chips, it comes from the Gulf. Now, the big guys, like TSMC, they have some supply built up, a buffer. But if this closure drags on, it threatens the very heart of this whole reshoring strategy. And finally, let's talk about the really big stuff. I'm talking about the massive, one-of-a-kind components for things like power plants and factories. They call this project cargo, and it's the most inflexible part of the whole shipping world. I mean, you can't just find another supplier for a custom-built power turbine off the shelf, and you sure as heck can't air freight it. So all of these critical infrastructure projects, they're now facing just crippling delays. So let's step back for a second. When you put all these pieces of the puzzle together, the geopolitical crises, the shock to the freight market, the ripple effects hitting fuel, food, and tech, you start to see a picture of a new and really challenging economic reality. The question we have to ask isn't when do things go back to normal anymore? It's how do we operate in this new normal? And if there's one thing to take away from all this, it's this. The world that existed back in January 2026, it's gone. It's so tempting to look at this and think, oh, it's just a temporary spike, we'll get through it. But all the evidence points to something much bigger. This is a structural break. The basic assumptions that our global supply chains were built on for the past 30 years, they just don't hold up anymore. This new reality demands a complete change in strategy, a pivot. For decades, the name of the game was all about one thing: cost optimization. Just in time, super lean inventories find the absolute lowest cost supplier no matter where they are. That was the old model. The new model, the new imperative, is all about resilience optimization. It means you have to build for durability, build in some redundancy, and accept the fact that disruption is no longer the exception, it's the new baseline. And that leaves us with one final, really important question. It's a question that every single business leader out there needs to be asking themselves right now. In this new era, where we're literally living in the shadow of war, where trade itself is being used as a weapon, is your supply chain built to last, or is it built to break? Because how you answer that is no longer just some operational detail. It's a fundamental test of whether your entire organization can survive with it.